I eat this bulking meal on the regular to meet all my micronutrient needs for the day, save time and money, help me feel strong, and most importantly, finally gain weight at a time when I've struggled for so long. Today I'm going to be sharing with you the exact step-by-step follow-along recipe, as well as some more specific breakdowns on why I'm choosing these foods and their interactions with every other ingredient in the dish. In an age of wooden cutting board, steak and egg TikTok videos, this may be frowned upon, but let me play carbs advocate. Potatoes are one of the cleanest starches that you can have with this meal, far better than white bread or white pasta. Potatoes were kind of designed by God to hydrate you because of their interaction with electrolytes and fluid. As a starch, they absorb a shitload of sodium, which is exploited often by Eastern European housewives. When they oversalt a soup, these women would put a potato in the pot to let it absorb all the salt. The potato itself has a lot of potassium, with 3 medium potatoes in this meal almost covering your entire potassium needs for the day. There's vitamin C as an antioxidant, but if you want to retain that, I recommend baking instead of boiling, because some of the water-soluble nutrients go out of the vegetable when you boil them and they get lost in that process. Eggs are a nutritional powerhouse. The sad part is that today they're memed into oblivion by broccoli haircut gym bros who know nothing about anything but saw one TikTok about how eggs make your penile region very, very large and very firm, and now firmly are on the saturated fat train. Still, regardless of current social media trends, the nutritional value of eggs hasn't changed. They're packed with choline, selenium, zinc, and protein, which is in line with pretty much everything we want this meal to do. Increase testosterone, alertness, satiation, you name it. These guys help. I'm only making 2 here, as the prices at the time of this recording are insane, with $8 to $10 per dozen in California as of February 2025. Ground beef is what this meal revolves around, what most of our seasoning will go towards, and what gives us most of our protein. I'm doing an 80-20 blend. This means 80% lean and 20% fat. Since protein has 4 calories per gram and fat has 9 calories per gram, a higher fat percentage blend will be ideal for bulking, as it will have vastly higher calories, as 464 by 4 by 8 by 4 plus 464 by, oh no, since 464 grams in 1 pound, so 4 and 9 calories per gram respectively. Let's do some math. 464 times 0.8 times 4 plus 464 times 0.2 times 9 is bigger than if we just did 465 by 4. This means if you're cutting, opt for a leaner blend. It's not as exciting as steak at first glance, and I know I would have refused to watch a beef recipe that wasn't steak when I first started cooking, but trust me on this. It's a lot cheaper than steak and will taste great, providing sustainability. You can have this meal multiple times a week without breaking the bank, or getting burnt out on steak, which is a real thing, trust me, I know. Way back a half decade before the fucking shit-ass undercooked cutting board steak trends of 2023 to 4, I was obsessed with steaks, having cheaper cuts up to 3 times a week. If your body responds well, that's a different ballgame, more power to you. But try it first before you think that steak every day is the right plan for you and go online demonizing other foods. I know for a fact that taste-wise, better steak less frequently takes the cake. Not telling you to be averse of things like cholesterol, saturated fat, because that's mostly a fucking big meme, big scam. These things are either do no negative or do actually a lot of benefits, have a lot of benefits, unless your genetics are such that you're predisposed to getting some illness from these. But I'm rather telling you to try it out first, but before you dismiss recipes that don't activate the same neurons as when you see a well-marbled ribeye online. You do also have variations, as I found out early on. The same garlic butter and thyme combo that works so well on steaks gets repulsive if it's all you have over and over. This is why we're adding some spices to this recipe, elevating it with an ingredient not often thought about. Milk is the most optional component to this dish, and is what makes it so versatile to fit calorie needs. Potatoes in themselves, especially when boiled, are very satiating for relatively few calories. the percentage of fat in the beef can be regulated accordingly, and the 2 eggs give so much bang for buck that omitting them for the sake of cutting would be asinine and would make no sense. But milk, on the other hand, is widely used by bloat maxers and Rippito enjoyers to achieve new body weights. Now, a pint here is a sizable amount, yeah, but it will give us a great amount of calcium, protein, and hydration benefits without having to go into GOMAT territory. GOMAT is gallon of milk a day, which is what some people in the weightlifting world recommend, like, oh, have a gallon of milk a day and you'll get big. Again, this is the most optional and can be omitted if you're severely sensitive or lactose intolerant. Now, getting into the culinary section, everyone knows that salting your food aggressively is the biggest improvement you can make to your cooking. Use kosher salt, all that basic shit. I'm gonna go into the more niche interactions that the sodium and the salt can have with the foods that no one mentions. Now, the ground beef you want to season after it's already in the pan. The initial stage of cooking should be focused on getting a nice browning, nothing else. This will give us a lot of flavor. Salt can be added to ground meats later, and nothing favorable is achieved by salting them ahead of time. The water the potatoes boil in should be salted generously, since this will dissolve. The type of salt doesn't matter here. You can use iodized table salt, you can use kosher, you can use fucking pink Himalayan, celery, you can go knock yourself out. Similar to cooking pasta, this will season the potato thoroughly in a way that you can't really achieve after boiling. For eggs, my advice will be a bit counterintuitive. I'm going to tell you to hold off on the salt here, only sprinkling a little around the whites and around the yolks in the middle of cooking. Now, the main thing flavor-wise these will add is a creaminess from the yolk that coat the other component and tie them together very beautifully. This creaminess is diminished surprisingly quickly when you oversalt an egg. If you use too much salt, you end up forgetting that the egg is there and instead be put off. This is because eggs are the antithesis of potatoes in terms of how they interact with salt. Whereas you can just abuse potatoes pretty heavy-handedly, fucking slap them on the, you know what, with a bunch of salt. Eggs, for whatever reason, are much more sensitive. It's for this reason that I recommend only a small amount of larger grain salt just around when the whites have set. Fat. Butter burns quickly at the high heats required to cook beef, so we'll add a bit of olive oil. Since lots of liquid will release from the ground beef, especially if you're using an 80-20 blend, which means 80% lean, 80% fat, you can take a bit more of a gamble and use only butter, but I recommend using a combination. Butter starts to burn at around 350 degrees Fahrenheit, I believe like 180 Celsius, while olive oil, even extra virgin, can handle way closer to 400. What causes the browning responsible for the color and flavor we're looking for is the Maillard reaction, which takes place at around 325 degrees. The olive oil will give us a bit of wiggle room to get the pan hot enough for this reaction. Unlike a steak, I would avoid seasoning the ground beef, as I've mentioned before, after we've put it in the pan. Doing so can dry the ground beef out and give it a meatloaf-like texture that we really want to avoid for this recipe. Oh, and by the way, olive oil from a trustable source, especially if it's cold pressed, extra virgin, all that, does not count as a seed oil and is perfectly healthy. If you don't believe me, on 2 separate days, make a salad. Dress one with a high quality olive oil and dress another with some 1-2-3 vegetable oil fucking rapeseed canola blend from the Dollar Tree. Eat both of those and compare how you feel after having the two. What was that? You don't want to make a salad with a sunflower oil. Yeah, of course not. Now how does the olive oil sound? Way better. Exactly. Feel perfectly fine using olive oil. Or enjoy trying to manage the heat perfectly and stop the butter from burning. Now, since the eggs cook significantly faster and at a lower heat than the ground beef, feel free to use only butter here. Using butter for the eggs also has a nice added benefit of making it significantly less likely to stick. This is because butter is not 100% fat. If you look at the calories in butter versus a pure fat, you'll see that they differ by about 20 calories per tablespoon. The difference is made up by milk solids and a little bit of water that both burn at higher temperatures. But here, when we're cooking the eggs, it will create a nice mini barrier between the egg and the pan, preventing it from sticking even on stainless steel or cast iron pans if you do it properly. Now the spice I hinted at earlier will be adding a brightness to an otherwise rich dish. We'll be using Aleppo Pepper as our main flavor, in addition to a bit of chili powder and cumin supporting, with garlic powder and pepper added in since they work almost everywhere. This should give us a nice Mediterranean flavor. Swap the Aleppo for tahine if you're looking for something a little bit more Mexican tasting. If you don't have either, don't stress. Season with what you have, just like you should use whatever gym equipment that your gym provides. Now, as far as potatoes go, we don't need to go crazy with spices, since this would create a bunch of conflicting flavors. Simply adding some sour cream or creme fraiche to the finished dish will max out what we want from the potatoes as a base for the rest of our meal, without conflicting with any other ingredients. If you're using a non-stick pan, which people usually don't like for its toxic coating, use a wooden spoon. If you use metal on a non-stick pan, it'll scrape the coating off, hitting you with the wombo combo of making the pan less non-stick and also putting more microplastics in your food. Yeehaw! If you use a plastic spatula on any pan, you risk overheating the plastic and getting even more of these microplastics into your food. So, if opting for non-stick, stick with a wooden spoon or spatula. If using a stainless steel or cast iron pan, feel free to scrape as much as you want with the metal, since the pan's resiliency will mean you can go to war with every bit of browning. Wooden spoons are your best option and your most safe bet if you're not sure of what your pan can handle scraping wise. Now let's go step by step. First, get any pot big enough to boil your potatoes. Fill around halfway to 2/3 full with water. You don't need to fill it all the way, since that will be inconvenient to drain and will take forever to boil. Put the potatoes in while the water is still cold. Salt the mixture liberally and set it on a very high heat. Once the time we're done with the rest of our meal, these guys should have been done at the very latest. Since our ideal potato here will be medium size, I'm using like a medium size red. Evidently, a thicker potato will require more cooking time. Have the lid halfway off the pot and watch out for any overboiling. This shouldn't happen as long as you use just enough water and keep an eye on things. You'll know the spuds are done when you can poke them pretty easily with a fork. When this happens, drain the water and set them aside. When you're draining the boiling water over the sink, make sure that you're at the same time running cold water, because if not, and if your pipes are plastic, then if you just fucking dump a bunch of directly boiling water, that may not end well for anyone involved. That may start to like semi-melt your drainage, your pipes, all your system, and I'm sure that will be very fun to explain to your parents. So to avoid doing that, be sure to run cold water in the tap at the same time to ameliorate the effect of the boiling water. Next, we'll make the beef the centerpiece of the dish. We'll get a fairly wide pan on high heat. Here I'm using a wok because it's easy to stir and keep things moving without spilling over onto our stove. You want to start on high heat, letting the pan preheat properly. This again depends on the pan. If you have a heavy bottom pan, like stainless steel or cast iron, you'll have to have the pan preheat for at least a minute or two, since these metals take longer to heat up. This wok that I'm using is relatively thin and light for its size, and so it heats up extremely quickly. For this reason, I'll add my butter and olive oil immediately. Not a lot, since the 80-20 blend will release a lot of fat. We just want to get it going. Now, we'll slam our beef in the pan and start breaking it up aggressively, since I'm using a wok meant to handle aggression. After we've broken up our pieces, we'll have them sear for a few minutes until they're brown enough that the smell changes to something significantly browner and richer, but not so much that all of the liquid has evaporated. Stir it a couple of times during this time, but not so frequently that you disrupt the browning. At this point, we'll do our seasoning. Add a good sprinkle of salt, nice crack of pepper, garlic powder, and a small sprinkle of the Aleppo Pepper, chili powder, and cumin. Cook until the noise changes from hissing to frying, and shut off the heat. Set this aside until you're ready to serve the dish. Now, frying the egg is pretty simple. You just need to practice how to build confidence needed to make them do the things you want to do. Unfortunately here, I tried the double one-handed crack method, and one of them ended up splitting, but it wasn't too bad and it was still very tasty in the end. To show how much room for error there is, if you just have the confidence, I'll make the egg in the same wok that I cooked the beef in, just to flex. This also negates the need for using extra fat, since the butter remains from before. If you're, well, I'm adding a little bit in because I poured it out with the rest of the fat, with the rest of the beef, but if you're careful, you can save a bunch of the fat and avoid having to do that in the first place. If you're a beginner in cooking, use a small stainless steel pan with only butter and follow the rest as I show. But for me, I'm going to be doing a wok again to stunt. It's important for non-stick pans to be properly preheated, especially for eggs, since the quick coagulation and setting of the whites will ensure smooth removal later. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, the things that turn me off from eggs are sometimes... Now, I don't know about you, but the thing that turns me off from eggs for sometimes weeks at a time is the gross, snotty texture of the improperly cooked whites. There are a few ways to remedy this with a fried egg. You can take the L and overcook the yolk slightly until the whites are forced to set. You can baste the egg in whatever fat you're cooking it in, sprinkle some water in the pan and cover it, or make it over easy by flipping it while you keep the yolk intact. I'm going to advise you to do a combination. Once the whites have mostly set, baste the egg over the yolk a few times, turn off the heat, and cover it. The yolk won't be 100% runny this way, which I actually prefer, and you avoid the much dreaded phlegm white that throws so many people off from making fried eggs. Firmly scrape it off the bottom with a preferably metal spatula. Again, only if your pan tolerates, which means not non-stick or copper. Take your drained boiled potatoes and cut them into pieces such that you can easily crush them on your plate. Smash them lightly in whatever plate you'll be serving on, and spoon over as much of your ground beef as you can reasonably fit. On one side of the plate, plop down a spoon of creme fraiche. Mine was actually a tiny bit moldy, but I took part that isn't moldy and just like full sent it because I commit to the bit. And place your 2 eggs on the other side. Sprinkle it with a bit more Aleppo, and optionally garnish with something green. This is more for the visuals than anything else, but it adds a definite pop. Pour out your pint of milk in 1 or more glasses, and enjoy the gains.